There is a very specific sound a house makes when it is suddenly empty. It's not the silence of the night, which is heavy and full of sleep. It is a hollow, ringing silence that settles in your bones, loud enough to make your ears ring. I woke up at 6:04 a.m. The sun wasn't even over the horizon yet, just that bruised purple light you get in Austin. Right before the humidity slams you in the face. I shuffled into the kitchen, my bare feet sticking to the travertine floor, expecting to find Ellington reading the paper, maybe complaining about the stock market. But the kitchen was empty. The air was dead still. And then I saw it, sitting right in the center of the marble island, a single sheet of pale blue stationery. It was our good paper, Crane & Co., heavy cream cardstock with a navy blue border. We only used it for weddings or funerals. I remember thinking, who died? Next to the note was a coffee cup. Wedgwood, fine bone china, white with a thin black stripe. He had poured a cup of black coffee and left it. I reached out and touched the ceramic. It was ice cold. That means he'd been gone for hours. He hadn't even had the decency to drink the coffee I brewed for him before he decided to destroy our lives. I picked up the paper. The handwriting was his, jagged and hurried, the ink bleeding slightly into the grain. Marisol, it started. No, dearest. No, my love. Just my name, like a judge reading a sentence. It said, I have found my soulmate. I can't live a lie anymore. I'm leaving. And then below that, circled in a heart so childish it made my stomach turn, the name Tallulah. Tallulah. Who names their child that? It sounds like a dance from the 1920s, not a person who steals husbands. And then my eyes dropped to the postscript. That's where the real knife was. I'm transferring the funds for our future. Don't try to follow us. The devil doesn't come dressed in red. He comes as family, wearing the cologne you bought him for Christmas. Telling you he's moving your money into a bank account for a ghost named Tallulah. I stood there for a long time. I looked at the Sub-Zero refrigerator, the Viking stove, the custom cabinets. I looked at 30 years of my life reflected in the cold surfaces of that kitchen. I wasn't crying. I was too confused to cry. My brain was doing that thing where it tries to rationalize the impossible. Maybe it's a joke. Maybe he's been kidnapped. But the coffee was cold. The coffee didn't lie. I pulled my iPhone out of my robe pocket. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it on the marble floor. I unlocked it and tapped the Chase app icon. I remember praying, not to God, but to the universe. I thought, please let him have taken half. Let him be a greedy coward, but a fair one. Let him leave me enough to keep the house, to keep the gilded lily open. The app loaded. The little blue circle spun, and then the numbers appeared. I opened the Chase app and my thumb hovered over the balance. I thought maybe he took half. He didn't. He took everything, down to the last penny. I remember staring at that screen, the zeros. They stared back at me like dead eyes. My stomach did this sickening lurch. A cold wave of nausea rolling over me so fast I had to grip the marble island. The air conditioning kicked on with a low hum, blasting cold air that raised goosebumps on my arms. I was burning up. It was 6:04 a.m. on a Tuesday. The silence in the kitchen wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, oppressive, accusatory. It was screaming, "You fool!" I looked at the Wedgwood cup sitting there, the black stripe mocking me. Cold coffee, cold heart. I tried Ellington's cell. My hands were trembling so violently I almost dropped the iPhone. I pressed the phone to my ear, praying he'd pick up, praying he'd say it was a glitch. Ring, ring, click, straight to voicemail. You've reached Ellington Ryland. Leave a message. His voice so breezy, so unbothered. I slammed the phone down on the granite counter. He ghosted me. After 30 years, he actually ghosted me. The text message from the night before sat on my lock screen. I'll be home late. Don't wait up. Home late. He wasn't coming home. He was gone. And he took everything. I threw on a silk blouse and slacks, not even checking the mirror, and got in the car. I don't even remember the drive to the Tarrytown branch. It was a blur of morning haze and manicured lawns. I parked her right in front of the Chase Bank on Exposition Boulevard. The humidity was already rising, sticking my clothes to my back, that thick Texas air. I walked in, heels clicking sharply on the terrazzo floor. Brenda, the branch manager, looked up from her desk. She gave me that polite, pitying smile people give when they think your life is perfect. "Marisol, you're here early," she said. Everything okay? I didn't have the energy for small talk. I needed to see the blood on the page. I need to print a transaction history, I said. From the joint account, I need to see the wire transfer details. She didn't argue. She just nodded and started typing on her keyboard. The printer started up, whirring and spitting out paper. She handed me the warm sheet. I looked at the timestamp. 3 a.m. Right in the middle of the night while I was asleep, he was robbing me blind. $850,000 transferred, gone, just like that. But that wasn't the part that made the blood run from my face. It was the recipient. It wasn't a personal account. It was DV Holdings LLC, and the memo line, it read, consultancy fee. My brain flashed back to 1994, the day we signed the prenup. We were in a high-rise downtown, young and so arrogant. I remember the smell of his cologne, sandalwood, and old money. I was 22, wearing a vintage dress. We laughed as we signed the paper. I thought I was signing a marriage certificate. I didn't realize I was signing my own dismissal notice. He told me, "This is just to protect the legacy, sweetheart. Desmond is the future. You just have to trust me." I trusted him. How quaint. I looked at the transfer details again. DV Holdings. I didn't know a Tallulah, but I knew exactly who D and V were. Desmond Vreeland, my stepson. I couldn't stay in that house a second longer. The silence in that kitchen was heavier than the humid Texas air pressing against the windows. It felt like the walls were closing in, smelling of that cold, untouched coffee and my own fear. I grabbed my purse's vintage Chanel clutch I bought at a consignment shop in Houston years ago, and I just walked out. I got into my Lexus, and I swear to you, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely get the key into the ignition. I needed to see someone who wouldn't look at me with those pitying eyes or lie to my face. I drove down Mopac, the sun blindingly bright, mocking my internal darkness until I hit South Congress. I pulled up outside Joe's Coffee, right across from that iconic "I love you so much" mural. Usually it makes me smile. Today, it felt like a slap in the face. Sable was already there, holding court at a corner table like the queen she is. She saw me coming, and I didn't have to say a word. She just pushed a cup toward me, black coffee, strong enough to strip paint, and waited. I sat down, the metal chair screeching against the concrete floor, and I laid my phone on the table between us. The screen was still lit up with that Chase bank statement. The one showing $850,000 gone. Vanished into the ether. He took it, I whispered, my voice cracking, every time. And Sable, he sent it to Desmond. Sable didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She's a former private investigator. She's seen things that would turn your hair white. She just picked up a croissant, tore off a piece, and chewed slowly, her eyes narrowing behind her tortoiseshell glasses. "Desmond Vreeland," she said flatly. "Your stepson. The boy you put through prep school. The one whose wedding you paid for." "DV Holdings LLC," I said, pointing a manicured finger at the screen. "That's the recipient. $850,000 labeled as a consultancy fee. For what? What consulting could that boy possibly do that's worth nearly $1 million? Sable took a sip of her espresso, looking thoughtful. "Listen to me, Marisol. Don't jump to conclusions just yet. It's easy to see a conspiracy here, but let's look at the logic. Ellington is a vain, foolish man, but he's historically lazy. If he wanted to steal money to run off with this, he might need a way to clean it, to hide it. Maybe Desmond isn't the mastermind. Maybe he's just the bagman." "The bagman?" I repeated. The thought made my stomach churn. You think my stepson is helping his father cheat me out of my life savings to fund a mistress? "I'm saying," Sable leaned in, lowering her voice so the hipsters at the next table wouldn't hear, "that men like Ellington often need a facilitator. Someone to set up the accounts, someone to handle the logistics so daddy doesn't get his hands dirty. It's disgusting, but it happens. Family protects family even when they're wrong." She pulled out her iPhone, the sleek black rectangle looking like a weapon in her hand. "But let's talk about this Tallulah. If Ellington is spending this kind of money, she exists. I want to see what we're dealing with." She tapped away, her nails clicking on the glass. I searched the name variations. Nothing on LinkedIn, nothing on Facebook. But look at this. She turned the screen toward me. An Instagram profile. The handle was Talua's Vibes. It's private, I said, peering at the blurry, indistinct sunset picture used as a profile photo. Of course it is. Look at the bio, though, Sable commanded, pointing a sharp fingernail. It says, living my best life in Austin. And there, right there, is a link in bio to a Venmo. Venmo? I let out a short, dry laugh that sounded more like a sob. How quaint. A high-end homewrecker who takes donations via Venmo? It's almost insulting. It's not just a Venmo, Saul. It's a paper trail, Sable said, her voice darkening. Nobody is who they say they are online. You know that, but this profile feels manufactured, like a prop. I stared at that blurry sunset. Was this woman even real? Or was she just another layer of the deceit? A digital ghost designed to make a fool out of me? The air conditioning in Joe's was blasting, but I felt a bead of sweat trickle down my spine. My brain was doing that thing where it tries to piece together a puzzle while the pieces are changing shape. If Desmond is involved, I said slowly, the rage finally starting to crystallize in my chest, cold and sharp. Damn, he's not just the bag man, he knows how much this hurts me. He knows I have nothing left. The credit cards are maxed, the business accounts are drained. Where am I supposed to go, Sable? Back to the shop? I can't make payroll. We will figure that out, Sable said, her voice leaving no room for argument. But first we need to know if DB Holdings is a real company or just a shell. I have a guy at the Secretary of State's office. Give me 1 second. She typed a quick text message. We sat there in silence for maybe 3 minutes. I watched the steam rise off my coffee, thinking about Ellington, thinking about the way he looked at me when he lied. That slight twitch in his left eyelid. How could I have slept next to a man for 30 years and not known he was capable of this? Sable's phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up, read the message, and her face went completely still. The color drained from her cheeks, which is terrifying because Sable never loses her cool. What? I asked, leaning forward. What is it? Did Desmond incorporate it? He's not just managing the money, Saul, Sable said, lowering her voice to a barely audible whisper. I checked the LLC registration. It was formed 2 days ago, by your husband. Sable had just dropped the bomb about the incorporation papers 2 days ago. Ellington had sat right there at that marble island, sipping his espresso, drafting the legal instrument of my destruction. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. The silence was deafening, broken only by the low hum of the refrigerator. I looked at Sable, and she gave me that nod. That do what you have to do nod. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my iPhone from the silk table. My hands were shaking, a little tremor like a leaf in the wind, but I pressed down on his contact name. It went straight to voicemail, of course. The coward, I tried again. Voicemail. I was pacing the length of the Persian rug, my heels clicking sharply against the travertine floor. I was about to throw the phone across the room. No, wait. The screen lit up. Incoming call. I didn't recognize the number, but the area code was 512. Local. I swiped right. I didn't say hello. I just breezed into the receiver, letting my silence do the talking. Marisol. His voice was strained, higher than usual. I didn't think you'd pick up. The audacity. The absolute unmitigated gall. I saw the papers, Ellington, I said. My voice didn't sound like my own. It sounded like it belonged to a stranger, a woman made of ice. I know about DV Holdings. I know you filed it on Tuesday. He sighed, a long, exaggerated exhale rattling against my eardrum. Look, I was going to tell you, I needed time to get my affairs in order. Your affairs? I practically shouted. You drained our accounts. You stole $850,000. At 3 a.m, I was sleeping next to you while you were wiring my life away. To some shell company? It wasn't your life, Marisol, he shot back. It was our money. And I'm entitled to it. I'm entitled to be happy. Happy? You call abandoning your wife happiness? You call stealing the operating capital for my business happiness? I could hear him shifting around. Maybe the sound of a car engine in the background. He was moving. The marriage has been loveless for years. The words hit me like a slap. Admit it, we've been roommates for a decade. You care more about your dusty old shop than you ever cared about me. Tallulah. She sees me. She appreciates me. I felt the rage bubbling up, hot and acidic in my throat. Tallulah, you think this is about a woman? Ellington, she doesn't exist. You're sending money to your son. That's when he laughed, a dry, humorless chuckle. Desmond didn't just help me, Marisol. He opened my eyes. He knows what it's like to be stifled. We needed to secure the assets so you couldn't freeze them. It's a consultancy fee, perfectly legal. I stopped pacing. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, stifled. I was the one who paid for his golf clubs. I was the one who hosted his boring partners. For dinner parties, I was the one who bailed Desmond out of jail when he got that DUI in Houston. Desmond helped you? I whispered. He told me exactly how to structure it, Ellington said, sounding almost proud. He's smart, Marisol. Smarter than you give him credit for. He knew you'd try to fight dirty. We got there first. I looked down at the screen of my phone. The call timer was ticking. 14 minutes. 14 minutes of my life I would never get back. You were both pathetic, I said. My voice dropping to a deadly calm. You think this is over? You think you can just take everything and ride off into the sunset with a ghost? I will find you. I will find Desmond. And I will take every cent back. Don't be tedious, he said, sounding bored. Enjoy your solitude. Maybe you can find an old chair to fix. He hung up on me. The line went dead. I stared at the call log. It showed Hubby. Hubby. A contact name he changed recently. To mock me, the number was a burner, but he made one mistake. He hung up on me. But not before he dropped one last bomb. Desmond didn't just help me, Marisol. He opened my eyes. He knows what it's like to be stifled. Why would Desmond say that? What had I ever done to him? I gave that boy everything. There was a piece of the puzzle I was missing. A motive deeper than money. After Sable hung up the phone, the silence in the kitchen was heavy. Thick like humid air before a thunderstorm. I was just standing there, staring at the lock screen on the burner phone. Hubby heart. A cruel, twisted little joke between my husband and my stepson made at my expense while I lay sleeping. Sable was furious, pacing the marble island, but I felt something else. I felt cold. It was a chill that started in my stomach and spread out to my fingertips. I checked my bank account again. $0.00. The house note was due in 3 days. The electricity was on autopay. I was destitute. And then the doorbell rang. It was 10:45 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was not expecting visitors. My social circle had evaporated the moment the money did. I walked over to the iPad mounted near the pantry and pulled up the Ring feed. And there he was. Desmond. He was standing on the front porch, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, looking furtively left and right. He smoothed his hair, checked his watch, smoothed his hair again. He looked nervous. Good. I let him in. What choice did I have? I walked to the front door and opened it. He was holding a bouquet of flowers. Not from a florist, wrapped in crinkly clear plastic with a barcode sticker. Grocery store carnations. Pink and cheap. He brought me $5 flowers after stealing $850,000. He stepped into the foyer, the smell of his expensive cologne, clashing with the stale air of the house. I came as soon as I heard, he said, his voice soft, dripping with a concern that did not reach his eyes. Is it true? Did he just leave? Yes, Desmond, he left. And he took everything with him. We moved to the living room. I sat in my wingback chair. He perched on the edge of the sofa, the role of the worried son. It was quite a performance. I looked at him, and for a second I did not see the thief in the suit. I saw the boy from 1995. I remembered the summer heat on the asphalt, running behind his bicycle, my hand gripping the seat. Don't let go, Marisol, he had screamed, laughing. I've got you. I had told him, I won't let you fall. I had held him up until he could pedal on his own. I had loved him. I had treated him like my own flesh and blood. And now, watching him adjust his cufflinks, I realized he was not just the recipient of the money. He was the reason. He started talking, spinning a narrative I was supposed to swallow. I told him it was a bad idea, Marisol. I really did. We talked about the LLC, the consultancy fee structure, but I thought he was just reallocating assets. I didn't know he was going to drain the accounts and vanish. He had the audacity to look offended. He said he was stifled, that you were suffocating him. I could feel my jaw tightening. Stifled. Me. The woman who managed his social calendar, his diet, his home. The woman who made him look good. Desmond stood up and walked over to the sideboard, helping himself to the cheese and crackers I had set out for Sable earlier. He picked up a cube of sharp cheddar and popped it into his mouth, chewing thoughtfully. And this woman, he said, wiping a crumb from his lip. Tallulah. Dad told me about her. I guess she's younger. Vibrant. He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. He even mentioned she turned him on to rosé. Whispering angel. Dad hates rosé, but he said Tallulah can't get enough of it. She's a sommelier, you know. Tallulah. She has exquisite taste, Desmond said, popping a cheese cube in his mouth. Ellington had never told me she was a sommelier. Desmond had never met her. You know that feeling when the ground beneath you just dissolves? Not slowly, not eroding over time, but just vanishes in an instant? That was Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in that wingback chair, watching Desmond chew on a piece of sharp cheddar like he owned the place, when a heavy, terrifying realization settled over me like the Austin humidity. This house, the Persian rugs, the Sub-Zero refrigerator, the crown molding that I spent 3 months stripping and painting myself, it wasn't mine. Not really. I remembered the paperwork from when we bought it in '98. It was held in the Vreeland family trust. And who do you think controls the trust? Ellington. And now that Ellington is gone, or rather, since Desmond is pulling Ellington's strings, that means Desmond holds the keys. I was living in a gilded cage and the lock had just been turned from the outside. I didn't wait for Desmond to finish his snack. I stood up, my knees trembling, and I walked him to the door. He gave me this look, this patronizing, syrupy, sweet smile, and said, "Think about what I said, Marisol. We're family. The devil doesn't come dressed in red. He comes as family." I closed the door in his face and slid the deadbolt home, as if a piece of metal could keep out the rot that had already infected my life. I went to the kitchen to pour another cup of coffee, but the pot was empty. That's when I heard it. A soft thud against the front door, not a knock. A slide. A piece of paper being shoved underneath the jamb. I froze. I knew what it was before I even looked down. I opened the door and picked up the single sheet of paper. It was crisp, heavy cream stock with a navy blue border Crane & Co. stationery, because even their cruelty has to be elegant. I read the words once, then again. Notice to vacate, signed by Desmond Vreeland, trustee. It gave me 30 days to vacate the Vreeland estate. 30 days! He hadn't wasted a single minute. I looked around the foyer. The Chase app on my phone still showed that zero balance. I couldn't fight a legal battle with a pocket full of lint and a maxed out credit card. I needed to retreat. I needed to survive. So I went upstairs, the silence of the house screaming at me. I didn't pack the furniture. I didn't pack the art. I packed my life. I grabbed the vintage Chanel clutch from the top of the closet. My mother gave me that, and I started filling suitcases. I took the jewelry, of course. The pearls, the diamonds, the pieces I restored with my own hands over the years. I took the silk blouses and the slacks from the Gilded Lily. I left the wedding dress in the back of the closet. 2 hours later, I was backing the Lexus out of the driveway. I had booked an Airbnb on South Congress, just a small studio above a coffee shop. It wasn't the Terrytown mansion, but it was mine. At least for the month. I adjusted the rearview mirror, catching my own eyes red-rimmed, tired but angry. So angry. I put the car in drive and started to roll forward. The sun was setting, casting that long golden Texas light across the lawn. And that's when I saw it. I looked up at the window of Ellington's home office, the room Desmond was never allowed in without knocking. The curtains were drawn back, and there was Desmond. He wasn't leaving. He was standing there, silhouetted against the glass, holding a glass of that whispering angel rosé. He raised it in a mock toast to me. He wasn't just kicking me out. He was moving in. You know that feeling when the floor drops out from under you? That was me standing in the middle of that Airbnb living room on South Congress. It wasn't home. It was a rental, a cozy artist loft with a mattress that felt like a bag of cement, and wall art that looked like it was printed at a Kinko's. I could hear the traffic on South Congress, the constant aggressive hum. of people living their best lives while mine was imploding. I opened my wallet. 3 crumpled 20s and a debit card that I knew was seconds away from being declined if I tried to buy anything more than a taco. I had credit cards, sure, but Ellington had canceled the supplementary Amex the day before he left. I was alone and I was broke. I sat on that ugly beige sofa and looked at the velvet pouch in my hand. I had grabbed it on my way out, a reflex. Inside was the jewelry Ellington had given me over the years, apologies for his absences, bribes for my silence. I pulled out the heavy white gold bangle, the Cartier love bracelet. I remembered exactly how the air felt the night he gave it to me. It was 2019, our 25th anniversary party at the Austin Country Club. The humidity was oppressive, sticking my silk dress to the back of my legs. Ellington was in his element, holding court, telling everyone how we were the power couple of Terrytown. He brought out the box, that distinct shade of Cartier red, and made a big show of clasping it on my wrist. He needed the little screwdriver to lock it shut. "There," he whispered, loud enough for the cameras to catch it. "Now you can never take it off." He thought it was romantic. I thought it felt like a shackle. I looked across the room and saw Desmond standing near the champagne fountain. He wasn't clapping. He was watching the bracelet like a hawk, eyeing a field mouse, already calculating how much it might be worth if it ever ended up in a liquidation sale. I drove up Burnett Road to the Austin Gold and Silver Exchange. It wasn't one of those shady back alley places with barred windows. It was bright, sterile, and smelled like industrial cleaner and old metal. The bell above the door didn't jingle. It dinged, a sharp electronic sound. Behind the glass counter stood a guy, maybe 50, wearing a short-sleeved button-down and a loosened tie. He didn't look like a criminal. He looked like an accountant who got lost. I walked up to the counter, my heels clicking on the linoleum, and I dumped the jewelry out of my silk pouch. It made a sad little clatter against the glass. The bracelet, the Rolex Datadust with the mother-of-pearl dial Ellington bought on Fifth Avenue to celebrate some business deal I didn't understand, and a pair of diamond studs. The broker picked up the Rolex first, holding it to his ear, shaking it gently. The rotor inside spun with a sound like a tiny mechanical heartbeat. "Good wait," he muttered, more to himself than to me. He didn't ask me why I was selling. He didn't give me a pitying look. He just typed into his computer, "I don't want a loan," I told him. My voice sounded stronger than I felt. "I want to sell it all." He ran the numbers. I watched the cursor blink on the screen. I remembered the Christmas morning Ellington gave me the watch. "This appreciates, Marisol," he had said, sipping his coffee. "Unlike some things." I thought he meant stocks. Maybe he meant me. "I can give you $12,500 for the lot," the broker said. He slid a piece of paper across the glass. "Cash or wire?" $12,500. That was it. That was the price tag on 30 years of swallowing my pride, on smiling at his boring colleagues, on playing the perfect trophy wife while he emptied our accounts to fund his son's delusions of grandeur. It wasn't enough. It was barely enough for a retainer, for a decent lawyer, let alone a war chest. But it was a start. My hand shook a little as I signed the receipt. I expected to feel sad. I expected to feel a sense of loss, a mourning for the life I had. But as I slid that bracelet off my wrist, for the first time in 4 years, feeling the cool air hit my skin, I didn't feel sad. I felt light. I was turning his vanity into my survival. I was pawning his lies to buy my freedom. I took the envelope of cash and the crumpled receipt he handed me. The timestamp on the receipt said 4:15 p.m. The broker looked up at me then, really looked at me, perhaps noticing the mascara hadn't quite managed to wipe away or the set of my jaw that was tighter than a drum. He leaned over the counter, his voice dropping a register. "You look like someone who's ready to burn the world down, Mrs. Vreeland." I looked at the receipt in my hand, then back at him, and I smiled for the first time in days. It wasn't a polite smile. It was the kind of smile that shows teeth. "Just the house," I said. The envelope of cash sat on the cheap particle board table like a heavy, dirty brick. $12,500. It wasn't enough to buy a house, and it certainly wasn't enough to wage legal war against a trust fund. But it was enough to start a fire. I was sitting in the living room of that overpriced Airbnb on South Congress, surrounded by beige furniture that smelled faintly of artificial vanilla and strangers. It was 5 a.m. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long, bruised shadows across the floorboards. I had the burner phone in one hand and a glass of lukewarm tap water in the other. I needed to see her face. I needed to see the woman who destroyed my life. I opened Instagram and started typing. I wasn't Marisol anymore. I was Sophie Orsi Renee 78, a retired interior designer from Dallas who loved horses and Cabernet. I stole a profile picture from a Pinterest boardsome woman with blonde hair looking away from the camera. It felt cheap, creating a lie to catch a liar. But the devil doesn't come dressed in red, does he? He comes in pixels and data. The page loaded. The profile was still that blurry sunset, the bio promising a best life. Private. I hit follow and waited. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. My heart was doing that erratic flutter against my ribs, a trapped bird. I was about to delete the account. Why would she accept a stranger? When the screen refreshed, Talua Vibes accepted your follow request. She didn't even look at my followers. She just wanted the numbers. She was vain. Good. Vanity makes you sloppy. I tapped on her grid. There was only one post. Just one. It was uploaded last night. I tapped it, and the photo filled the screen. It was a selfie. The lighting was dim, moody, probably taken in one of those steakhouses downtown, where the lights are turned down low so you can't see the prices on the menu. And there he was, Ellington. He was sitting in a booth wearing that navy blazer I got him for our 25th anniversary. He was smiling. That soft, stupid smile he used to reserve for me when I let him win an argument. He was looking at the camera, or rather at the person holding it. The caption underneath cut deep, "Dinner with my king." War! I felt the bile rise in my throat. I stared at the empty chair next to him, waiting to see her face. But the woman taking the photo had cropped herself out. All I could see was Ellington and his arrogant happiness. I was about to throw the phone against the wall when I noticed the background. Behind them was a large gilded mirror. It reflected the table, the empty chairs, and the photographer. I zoomed in. I pinched the screen until my fingertips ached, stretching the pixels until the image was a grainy mess of color. But there it was, in the reflection, a hand holding the phone. A large hand, a man's hand. My brain scrambled to make sense of it. Was Ellington taking a selfie? No, he was looking at the lens. The hand in the mirror was angled wrong. Someone else was taking the photo. My eyes drifted down to the hand's pinky finger. A ring. A heavy gold signet ring with a deep dark red stone. A garnet? I froze. The air in the room suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. I knew that ring. I knew the scratch on the gold band, the way the garnet caught the light like a drop of blood. I bought that ring at an antique shop on West 6th Street in 2004. I paid $300 for it. It was a graduation present for Desmond. He had cried when I gave it to him, said it made him feel like a man. He told me he lost it at a lake party 5 years ago. I even helped him look for it. But there it was, on the hand taking a selfie for a mistress that doesn't exist. Why was Talil wearing my stepson's ring? I walked out of that Airbnb with the image of that garnet ring burned into the back of my eyelids. It lingered like a negative you can't develop. Desmond. My own stepson. The man currently sitting in my living room drinking my rosé. It was a betrayal so twisted, so utterly macabre, that I almost had to laugh to keep from screaming right there on South Congress. But screaming doesn't get you answers, and it certainly doesn't get your money back. I needed someone who understood the language of war. In Austin, that means a lawyer with a corner office and a billing rate that makes your teeth hurt. That's how I ended up sitting across from Sheila. It's on the 40th floor of a glass tower downtown, looking down on the ants in the traffic below. The air up there is different, filtered, cold, smelling of old paper and expensive leather. It smells like power. Sheila didn't offer me a tissue. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She looked at me over the rim of her reading glasses with eyes like flint and slid a retainer agreement across the mahogany desk. I looked at the number. It was steep. It would take a huge chunk of the cash I got from pawning Ellington's precious watch and bracelet. But what choice did I have? Start from the beginning, she said, her voice sharp as a scalpel. And don't leave out the parts that make you look naive. So I told her. I told her about the text message, the consultancy fee, the 3 a.m. transfer, and the LLC form just 2 days before my life imploded. I watched her face as I spoke. She didn't blink. She just tapped her pen against a stack of preliminary subpoena drafts. Tap, tap, tap. The sound echoed in the room like a ticking clock. "It looks bad, Marisol," she said finally. On paper, Ellington transferred the money voluntarily. He signed the authorization. He labeled it a consultancy fee. Unless we can prove he was coerced or incompetent, the law views this as a marital asset he had every right to move. I felt my stomach drop out. I leaned forward, gripping the arms of the chair so hard my knuckles turned white. "But it's a shell," I said, my voice trembling. "DB Holdings isn't real, it's a ghost. He's using it to hide the money so I can't touch it in a divorce." Sheila stopped tapping. She looked down at the paperwork, a small, dangerous smile playing at the corner of her mouth. "Exactly," she said. "Shell companies are like Roach Motel's money checks in, but it doesn't check out. If we can prove this was a fraudulent transfer sham transaction designed to defraud you, we can pierce the veil. We can claw that money back. Every dime." She picked up the draft and handed it to me. The words "sub poena, deuces to come," were stamped in bold red letters at the top. "We're going to serve DB Holdings," she said. "We're going to subpoena their bank records, their correspondence, their formation documents. We're going to find out where that $50,000 actually landed." I took the paper. It felt thin, fragile, but it was the heaviest thing I'd ever held. It was a weapon. I walked out of Sheila's office with that subpoena draft in my purse. And honestly, I felt a strange kind of calm. The kind of calm that comes right before a hurricane rips the roof off a house. My phone buzzed in my pocket and I knew it was Sable before I even looked. She doesn't sleep. She just hunts. I slid my finger across the screen. "Tell me you found a bank account," I said. I was walking to my car, the humidity hitting me like a wet wool blanket. Austin in July is no joke, especially when you're carrying the weight of a destroyed marriage. Sable's voice came through sharp and staticky. "Better," she said. "I found the registered agent for DV Holdings. And Marisol, it isn't a person. It's a place." "It's a place?" She sent me a pin. I opened the map on my phone, watching the little blue dot drop onto a gray industrial zone. The address was for Secure Storage Austin. Can you believe that? My stepson stole millions and he's hiding it in a metal box. How quaint. I got into my car and keyed the address into the GPS. The robotic voice told me to head east on Cesar Chavez. I called Sable back. "Meet me there," I told her. "I don't want to be alone when I open Pandora's box." The drive was a blur of taillights and neon signs. I kept thinking about that garnet ring. If Desmond was Tallulah, what was he storing in a unit? Cash? The deed to my house? Or maybe evidence of whatever else he's done that I don't even know about yet? The devil doesn't come dressed in red. He comes as family. I turned onto a dirt access road, my tires crunching over gravel. The place was fortress-like. 10-foot chain-link fences stretched into darkness. Sable was already there, parked in her black SUV under a flickering halogen light. She was tapping on her tablet, the blue light illuminating her fierce expression. I pulled up beside her and killed the engine. The silence was heavy, just the chirping of cicadas and the distant hum of the highway. I rolled down the window, smelling hot asphalt and something faintly metallic. "Unit 42012, Sable whispered, pointing to a row of orange doors near the back. "That's the address listed on the incorporation paperwork. It's the only lead we have." We sat there for 20 minutes, maybe 30. I was watching the gate like a hawk. My brain was replaying every conversation we ever had, looking for the lie. I thought about Desmond at the dinner table swirling that cheap rosé. I thought about the way he looked at my jewelry. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. I wanted to scream, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. And then, movement! The heavy electronic gate groaned and began to roll open. My heart skipped. A car started moving inside the facility, crawling toward the exit. It was a silver Sedana Toyota Camry, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. "That's them," Sable hissed. I slumped down in my seat, peering over the dashboard as the car pulled out. The headlights swept across my hood, blinding me for a second, and then they passed. I saw the driver's profile, the sharp nose, the receding hairline he tries to hide. We pulled up just as a silver sedan was leaving. I recognized the driver immediately. It wasn't Ellington, it was Desmond. And he wasn't alone. The taillights of that silver sedan faded into the humid haze of Highway 183 like two red eyes winking shut. For a second, I just stood there in the dark, the Texas night sticking to my skin like a second layer of silk, wondering who was sitting in the passenger seat. Was it Ellington? Was it some poor girl he'd duped into being the face of Tallulah? But then the logic of it hit me, cold and sharp as a scalpel. If we followed the car, we might just end up at a motel or a 24-hour diner, watching them eat pancakes through a window. But here, Unit 4 2012, this was the heart of the operation. The devil doesn't come dressed in red, he comes as family, and he keeps his paperwork in storage units off the access road. Sable didn't even wait for me to decide. She was already moving, her heels clicking softly in the pavement, walking toward that orange door like she owned the place. I had to practically jog to catch up, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might bruise the bone. "Sable, what are you doing? It's locked," I hissed, my voice sounding too loud in the empty corridor. She just gave me this look over her shoulder, half smirk, half steel, and reached into her designer tote bag. She pulled out a small leather roll that unzipped to reveal a set of precision tools that looked like they belonged in a dentist's office. Not a handbag. "You don't spend 20 years as a PI in Houston without learning a few party tricks," she whispered, kneeling in front of the padlock. "Marisol, watch the alley. If a security guard comes, you distract him. Cry. You good at that?" I wanted to be offended. Really, I did, but the adrenaline was a flood in my veins. I turned my back to her, scanning the shadows, listening to the distant hum of the traffic, the crickets screaming in the dry grass. Behind me, I heard the soft, metallic snick of tumblers falling into place. It was a sound that promised danger. Then the heavy clank of the shackle swinging open. "We're in," Sable breathed. We rolled the metal door up just enough to duck under, and the smell hit me first. It wasn't the musty odor of old cardboard or mothballs you'd expect in a storage unit. It was sterile, electric, smelling of ozone, warm plastic, and that specific sharp scent of cheap cologne masking stale coffee. I clicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the dust motes dancing in the stagnant air, and what I saw made my stomach drop into my heels. This wasn't storage. It was a studio. There was a desk of cheap faux wood particle board set up from IKEA, but what was on it was terrifyingly high-tech. Dual monitors glowed with a soft alien blue light, even though the unit was supposedly unpowered. A battery backup hummed in the corner. There was a high-definition webcam mounted on a tripod positioned perfectly in front of a black velvet backdrop. And then I saw the clothes. Racked against the far wall was a rolling rack you'd see in a garment district warehouse, but instead of coats or suits, it was stuffed with women's clothing. I walked over, my footsteps muffled by the industrial carpet, and ran my hand over the fabric. Silk blouses in sizes 0, 2, and 4. Dresses that cost more than my first car. But here's the thing that made the hair on my arms stand up. The sizes were all wrong. One dress was a child's small, the next a woman's large. They weren't for one person. They were props. "Look at this," Sable said from the desk, her voice was tight. I shone my light over to where she was standing. Pinned to a cork board above the computers was a collage. It looked like a serial killer's shrine or a casting director's fever dream. There were printed headshots of women's faces. Some were laughing, some were pouting, some looking seductively over a shoulder. I leaned in closer, recognizing the Getty Images watermark in the corner of one. They were stock photos. None of them were the same woman. One had brown eyes, another blue. One had a pixie cut, another long waves. It was a Frankenstein monster of a persona. "He wasn't catfishing your husband with one woman," Sable said, turning to me, her face pale in the flashlight's glare. "He was curating an ideal, a chimera." I felt sick. I thought back to Ellington, rambling on about Tallulah's laugh, her wit, her wreathful energy. It was all script. Desmond hadn't just stolen the money. He'd engineered a fantasy to manipulate his own father. I looked down at the desk, cluttered with scripts printed on standard copy paper dialogue trees for text messages, notes on emotional triggers, and romantic pacing. It was sociopathic in its precision. And there, sitting right next to a canister of setting powder and a ring light, was a wig stand. I picked up the wig from the desk. It was long, blonde, exactly like the hair in the blurry Instagram photos. The fibers felt synthetic and cold against my fingers. "It's a studio," I whispered, the realization settling over me like a shroud. "Tallulah isn't a person. She's a production." The silence in that storage unit was so heavy it felt like it was pressing against my eardrums. The only sound was the faint electric hum of those computer cooling fans and the distant rush of traffic. Sable moved fast. She didn't sit. She crouched over the desk, her leather jacket creaking in the quiet, and tapped the spacebar on the keyboard. The monitor flared to life, blinding us for a second. The desktop background was just a generic, washed-out gray, but open right in the center was an iMessage window. The contact name at the top wasn't Tallulah. It was a simple, heartbreaking daddy. But I knew better. I knew who was on the other end of that screen. The cursor blinked rhythmically, a steady heartbeat in a room that felt dead. "Look at this," Sable whispered, pointing a manicured fingernail at the scroll bar. I leaned in, squinting at the text bubbles. The blue ones were from Ellington, desperate pleading. Pathetic little blocks of text riddled with typos and missed autocorrects. The gray ones were from her. They were precise, calculated, cold, grammatically perfect. I read the messages out loud to myself, barely breathing, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "She doesn't appreciate your genius, Ellington. Only I do. She sees you as a wallet. I see you as a king. Can you believe that? My husband, a man who built a logistics empire, falling for this high school drama club manipulation?" But he did. I could see it in his replies. "I feel so alive when I talk to you," he had typed at 2014 a.m. "Marisol just looks at me with those dead eyes. She wants me to be something I'm not. She's suffocating me." It made me physically sick to my stomach. Not because of the betrayal, I was past that, but because of the cruelty. It wasn't just about the money. It was about dismantling him, piece by piece, turning him against me, against his own life, until the only person he trusted was a figment. They were grooming him like a pedophile grooms a child. Sable scrolled up, faster and faster, the timestamps blurring into a stream of dates. February, January, December, we went back months. The manipulation had a rhythm. Love bombing, then isolation, then the demand for money. Here Sable said, stopping abruptly, "Read this one." The text was from Tallulah. "You have to break free, Ellington. The money is your lifeline. If you don't secure it, she'll win. She'll trap you forever. Send the wire tonight. Don't wait up." The exact same words he texted me on the night he emptied our accounts. He wasn't even speaking to me. He was just reading from a script written by his own son. I felt a strange pang of something. Sympathy? For Ellington? God help me, I did. Imagine being that lonely. Imagine being that desperate to be seen that you'd let a stranger feed you lines. He was a victim here. Yes, he was a willing idiot, a fool who let his ego drive the car, but he was being preyed upon by a shark with his own DNA. We kept scrolling. The psychological abuse was relentless. They used his insecurities like weapons. His age, his fears that he was becoming irrelevant. They told him I was poisoning him, that I was keeping him from his true potential. It was insidious. It was evil. And then we hit the bottom. The very first message in the thread. I looked at the date and my blood ran cold. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October 3 years ago. I remembered that Tuesday vividly. It was the day after Ellington had come home from the club, furious, slamming his tumbler of scotch down on the coaster so hard the crystal nearly shattered. He asked for what? I had said, shocked at the audacity, $50,000 Ellington had spat. I looked at the screen, the harsh light illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The first message from Tallulah was sent at 10:30 a.m. the very next morning. It simply read, "I saw you at the club yesterday. You looked so handsome. I've been waiting for the right moment to say hello." It wasn't a romance. It wasn't an affair. It was a hit job. The date matched perfectly. I knew Desmond was watching. He had to be. After what we found in Unit 4 2012, I knew he wasn't just going to sit back and let me fade away. He wanted me destitute. He wanted me broken, begging on the doorstep of a house he stole from me. So I decided to give him exactly what he wanted, but with a twist. I needed to play the part of the pathetic, washed-up ex-wife who couldn't even afford a latte, all while I had $12,000 in cash taped to the inside of my purse. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. I cried on the phone with Sable loud enough for the bugs I assumed were in the townhouse to hear. I lamented about selling my jewelry, which I had already done, but he didn't need to know about the war chest I was building. I wanted him to think I was desperate. I wanted him to think I was looking for work to keep the lights on. I answered an ad in the classifieds. Can you believe that? Me, Marisol Delacroix, looking at the help wanted section. It was for a part-time restorer at a little shop off South Congress called the Gilded Lily. The irony was not lost on me. I walked in there wearing a pair of slacks I'd bought at a thrift store good wool blend, but a little tight at the waist, and a silk blouse that had lost its sheen years ago. I looked tired. I looked broke. I looked exactly like a woman whose husband had run off with a phantom. The moment the bell above the door chimed, that smell hit me. It's a specific smell, distinct and heavy. It was a mixture of beeswax, old dust, denatured alcohol, and the sharp, chemical tang of varnish. To anyone else, it might smell like a damp basement or a grandma's attic. To me, it smelled like power. It smelled like truth. The shop was chaotic, beautiful, terrifying chaos. Stacks of Victorian chairs with horsehair stuffing exploding from the seams, gilded mirrors with tarnished silvering, heavy oak tables that had seen 100 Thanksgivings. It was messy. Unlike that pristine, cold museum Desmond was trying to turn my life into, this place was alive. The owner, Sarah, she looked me up and down. She was younger, maybe 40, with gray paint under her fingernails and hair scraped back and a messy bun. She didn't recognize me from the society pages, of course she didn't. To her, I was just another older woman looking for a gig to pay the electric bill. She asked if I had experience. I told her I used to dabble in furniture. I lied. I didn't dabble. I was a master, but I needed her to underestimate me. I needed to be invisible. She pointed a finger toward the back corner, to a battered chair hidden under a drop cloth. Water stain on the mahogany, she said, her voice dismissive. Joints loose, veneer is peeling. See what you can do. If it's salvageable, I'll pay you $20 an hour. I sat down on that wooden stool and my hands started shaking. Not from fear, but from memory. It had been 30 years since I held a proper cabinet scraper. I remembered the day Ellington told me to pack up my tools. We were living in the Terrytown house then. He looked at my hands stained with walnut dye and grimaced. He said, Marisol, we don't need the smell of glue in the house. We have people for that. You look like a maid. He made me feel small. He made my passion feel like a dirty little hobby, something common women did while real wives hosted charity galas. I remembered looking at my hands, feeling ashamed, and putting my chisels in a box that eventually ended up in the trash. But sitting there in the Gilded Lily with the afternoon sun cutting through the dust motes dancing in the air, that shame evaporated. How quaint that I let a man like Ellington define my worth. I picked up the scraper. I felt the heft of the steel, the comfort of the wooden handle. I looked at the grain of the wood. It was telling me a story. It was damaged, scarred, neglected. It was me. I angled the blade and pulled. Shh, click, shh, click, shh, click. There is a rhythm to restoration. It's hypnotic. You have to listen to the wood. You can't force it. You have to coax the old gray finish off layer by layer, revealing the beauty that's been suffocated underneath. I worked for 3 hours straight. I forgot about the con. I forgot about Desmond and his fake girlfriend and his manipulation scripts. I just breathed in the turpentine fumes and felt the resistance of the wood giving way to my will. I stripped the dark, grimy varnish down to the raw, rich red brown of the mahogany. I mixed the hide glue, warm and sticky, and reset the loose joint, clamping it tight until it held fast. I rubbed the new stain in with a piece of cheesecloth, moving in circles, rubbing the life back into the dry fibers. My hands knew exactly what to do, moving with the precision that surprised even me. When I finally stood up, my lower back ached, and there was a crick in my neck, but my heart was soaring. The chair wasn't just fixed. It was resurrected. It glowed with a warmth that had been buried for decades. Sarah came over, wiping her hands on a rag. She stopped dead. She looked at the chair, then at me. She ran her hand over the armrest, feeling the silk-smooth finish, checking the lines of the repair. There wasn't a seam to be found. She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time, seeing past the thrift store clothes. The shop owner Sarah told me I had a gift. For the first time in 30 years, I was Marisol the Restorer, not Mrs. Rayland. And I was going to restore my life the same way. I was sitting on that wooden stool in the back room of the Gilded Lily, the air thick with chemical scent. My hands were stained with the dark, rich patina of the mahogany. I had spent 4 hours breathing life back into it. I was exhausted, physically my lower back throbbing. But God, my heart, it was soaring. I looked at that chair and I didn't see a piece of furniture. I saw myself, stripped down to the bare wood, sanded raw, and then built back up stronger than before. I was finally Marisol the Restorer again, not Marisol the wife, not Marisol the fool. The silence in the shop was heavy, comforting like a warm blanket on a cold night. But then, my phone began to vibrate against the scarred wooden table. It wasn't a polite buzz. It was that violent, relentless hammering that signals an emergency. I looked down. The screen lit up the dark room, casting a ghostly blue pallor over my tools. Ellington? I just stared at the name. I felt no urge to answer. Why would I? The buzzing went on, a desperate plea for attention I had denied him for years. Finally, it stopped. A moment later, the notification dropped. New voicemail. I pressed play. The audio quality was terrible wind howling, the distinct rumble of street traffic, the sound of a man completely unraveling. He was breathless, his voice cracking in that way men do when they realize their delusions have finally collapsed. "Marisol," he gasped. "I can't find her. She's gone. The number... it's disconnected." I just get that automated message, the robot telling me it doesn't exist. He paused, and I heard him hiccup, a pathetic wet sound. "And the money. The transfer is showing as complete, but the account is empty. It's all gone. I'm at the condo, and I can't get in." I sat there, perfectly still, letting the silence of the shop wrap around me. The smell of varnish suddenly smelled like victory. I swiped over to my text messages while the voicemail played out. The screen was a graveyard of panic. There, sent at 2014 a.m., was a text from him. "I can't reach her. The money is gone." How quaint. He realizes the money is gone only after the girl vanishes? It's almost insulting to his thievery. Then another message popped up. This one was from Desmond. It was short, sharp, and absolutely devastating. "Dad, stop calling me. I did what I had to do. The devil doesn't come dressed in red. He comes as family." I felt a cold, sharp laugh bubble up in my chest, but I swallowed it down. I just traced the grain of the wood on the table with my thumbnail. Did what he had to do. He stole his father's life. The voicemail cut to a second recording. Ellington was sobbing now, openly and without shame. "She blocked me," he wept. "And Desmond. Desmond changed the locks on the condo. I'm standing on the sidewalk like an idiot. I looked up at the ceiling, the exposed beams of the boutique's back room. The irony was so thick you could choke on it. He left me with nothing to chase a ghost. And now he was locked out of the kingdom he bought with my suffering. The pieces were finally falling into place for him, but it was too late. The voicemail ended. That jagged, ugly sound of a grown man sobbing into a receiver cut off, leaving me in the sudden, deafening quiet of the shop. It was Thursday afternoon, probably around 2:30 p.m. The sun was hitting the antique chandelier in the front window of the Gilded Lily, sending little fractured rainbows dancing across the mahogany counter. It was beautiful. It was serene. And it was time to ruin a man. You know that feeling when you realize you're holding all the cards? It's a heady thing, isn't it? It's better than champagne. Ellington is out there right now, probably sitting in that silver Lexus he refused to trade in, wondering where his Tallulah went. He's realizing that the condo key Desmond gave him doesn't work. He's realizing his phone calls to his son are going straight to voicemail. He is standing in the wreckage of his own stupidity, and the only person left on earth who he thinks might give a damn is me. How quaint. He really thinks I'm sitting here pining for him. He thinks I'm the weeping widow, the abandoned trophy wife, too old and too scared to survive without him. I opened my MacBook Air. The logo glowed, that familiar, arrogant white. My hands were steady. I wasn't nervous. I was Designing. I was restoring a piece of furniture, only this time, the piece of furniture was the truth. And I was about to strip away all the ugly varnish of his lies. I opened a fresh email draft. I didn't use my phone. I wanted a paper trail. A nice, clean digital timestamp that Sheila could use in court later. I typed in his address, ellingtonreland@gmail.com. The subject line had to be perfect, not angry, not desperate, just inevitable. I know about Desmond. I started typing, the keys clacking softly in the empty shop. Ellington, I heard your message. I know Desmond took everything. I know he lied to you about me, just like he lied to you about her. I don't care about the money right now. I just want my husband back. We can fix this. If we work together, we can prove fraud. But we have to do it now. Meet me at the shop at 6 p.m. The back door will be unlocked. Come alone. I read it over. It was perfect. It was a cocktail of truth and absolute lies. Yes, Desmond took the money. Yes, he lied. But the part about wanting my husband back, that was the bait. That was the worm wriggling on the hook. Ellington is so desperate for validation right now, so desperate to believe he isn't the villain of this story, that he will walk right into a trap to hear someone say, "It wasn't your fault." I pressed send. The screen made that soft whoosh noise. Done. I sat back around the shop. The silence was heavy. I could smell the beeswax I had applied to the credenza earlier that morning. It's a scent of turpentine and honey, old and reliable. It used to make Ellington sneeze. He said it smelled like desperation and old ladies. Well, look at us now. The smell of old ladies is buying emerald silk blouses, and the smell of expensive cologne is sleeping in a parking garage off Mopac. I remembered our anniversary dinner at Jeffrey's 5 years ago. He ordered the $200 tomahawk steak, cut into it, looked me in the eye, and told me I was getting too long in the tooth to wear my hair down. I smiled then. I drank my wine. I plotted then, too. I just didn't know I'd be plotting this specific chess move. I stood up and walked to the back office where I kept my things. I needed to look the part. I couldn't greet him looking like a woman who has been sleeping on a cot in her antique shop for 2 weeks. I needed to look like the woman he abandoned, a woman who has resources, a woman who has secrets. I took out the emerald silk blouse. It's a deep, vibrant green, the color of envy, the color of money. It buttons up to the neck, severe but elegant. I slipped it on. The silk felt cool against my skin, like water. I smoothed the collar in the mirror. I saw my eyes. They weren't crying, they were sharp. They were the eyes of a predator who has finally cornered the prey. I walked back out to the main floor. I needed to make sure I captured every word of this confession. I took my iPhone 14 Pro from my bag. I didn't trust the cloud backup implicitly, so I cleared 20 gigs of space just to be safe. I didn't want a storage full notification to cut off the sound of his downfall. I hit record. I let it run for 5 seconds of silence to capture the ambient noise. The AC kicking on, the distant traffic on South Congress establishing the timeline. Then I placed the phone face up right in the center of the mahogany table. I slid it between a vintage Tiffany lamp and a heavy brass inkwell. He won't even see it. He'll be too busy looking at me, trying to gauge if I'm going to slap him or kiss him. He'll be so relieved to have an ally, he'll spill his guts. He'll tell me how Desmond manipulated him. He'll tell me about the wire transfers. He'll incriminate himself and his son in one breathless, pathetic swoon. I checked the time on the grandfather clock in the corner. 5:45 p.m. He was probably driving over right now, tail between his legs, ready to beg for forgiveness. The devil doesn't come dressed in red. He comes as family. And sometimes he comes as a repentant husband bringing you a bouquet of cheap excuses. I placed my phone in the center of the table, recording app active. I put on my emerald silk blouse. It was time to direct the final scene of this tragedy. It was 5:58 p.m. The air inside the Gilded Lily was thick, heavy with the scent of beeswax, old varnish, and the sweet, cloying smell of the Confederate jasmine blooming right outside the window. I sat behind the mahogany table, the same one I'd spent 3 weeks restoring, stripping away years of grime to reveal the tiger-striped grain underneath. And I stared at the iPhone 14 Pro sitting in the center. The screen was black, a mirror reflecting the Tiffany lamp's green glass shade and my own face, At 6 p.m. exactly, the brass bell above the front door jangled. It wasn't a delicate ring, it was a harsh, clattering sound that cut through the silence like a knife. I didn't stand up. I didn't offer a greeting. I just watched as Ellington Vreeland, my husband of 30 years, stumbled into my shop. He looked like a ghost of himself. His shirt, a pale blue Ralph Lauren polo I'd ironed for him 100 times, was plastered to his back with dark, wet sweat stains. His hair, usually perfectly coiffed with that expensive pomade he liked, was sticking up in frantic tufts, and he smelled... God, he smelled like fear. Sharp, acidic sweat mixed with the stale odor of cheap whiskey and exhaust fumes. He stood there in the doorway, blinking against the dim light, his chest heaving like he'd run a marathon. Then he saw me. He locked eyes with me, and I saw something shatter behind his pupils. It was relief. He actually thought he was safe. Marisol, he choked out. His voice was wrecked, raspy and thin. She's gone. Tallulah. Lock the door. I went to the condo and the key code didn't work. She changed the locks. I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking softly under my weight. I crossed my legs, smoothing the fabric of my emerald silk blouse. I didn't say a word. I just let him hang there, suspended in his own misery. I tried to call her, he stammered, stepping further into the room, his hands gesturing wildly, helplessly. I tried to call Desmond, but he won't answer. I don't understand. We had a plan. We were leaving tonight. The transfer went through. I checked the app this morning. Everything was set for the new life in. He trailed off, realizing perhaps too late that he was confessing his sins to the wrong person. A new life, I repeated softly. My voice was steady, terrifyingly so. Is that what we're calling it? You have to help me, he pleaded, coming up to the edge of the table. He placed his hands on the mahogany, leaving sweaty palm prints on the finish I had just polished. She took everything, Marisol. The money, the keys. She played me. I thought she loved me. She told me I was stifled. She told me I was a king who deserved better than a... He stopped himself, but the word hung in the humid air anyway. A tired, aging wife. I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw the way his hands trembled with a palsy I hadn't noticed before. I remembered the note on the Crane & Co. stationery. I remembered the Chase Bank balance showing 0. I remembered the text message. I'll be home late. Don't wait up. You're right about one thing, Ellington, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a shout. You were played, but not by a woman. He frowned, confusion knitting his brows together. What are you talking about? I saw her. We were intimate. I reached out and tapped the screen of my iPhone. Sit down. Marisol, I don't have time for this. I need to find Desmond. He'll know what to do. He's the one who set up the LLC. He handled the consultancy fee. The consultancy fee, I mused, savoring the words like a fine wine. $3 million, Ellington. Transferred at 3 a.m. to DV Holdings LLC. Did you ever ask yourself who DV was? Desmond Vreeland, he said instantly like a well-trained dog. My son. He set it up for tax purposes. He told me it was the only way to protect the assets from you. The way he spat the word you out with such casual venom almost made me smile. It was pathetic, really. Desmond, I said. I picked up the phone and unlocked it. I pulled up the video file Sable had managed to recover. The storage unit off Highway 183. The one filled with wigs and ring lights. The unit was filled with wigs and ring lights. I pressed play. The room filled with a sound that made Ellington freeze. It was a woman's voice, breathy and seductive. Oh, Daddy, you're so good to me. Send the wire tonight. Ellington's face went pale. He recognized it. Of course he did. But then the audio skipped. A jagged burst of static tore through the recording, stripping away the digital filter. Underneath the synthesized feminine tone, another voice bled through, a deeper voice, a voice with a specific nasal cadence. A voice that said, send the wire tonight, with the exact same inflection Ellington had heard 1,000 times at the dinner table. The voice of Desmond Vreeland. Ellington stared at the phone, his mouth hanging open. The audio looped. The glitch happened again. Bazit, send the wire. Bazits. That, I said, watching the color drain from his face until he looked like a corpse, is not a 24-year-old Instagram model. That is your son, using a voice modulator app. No, Ellington whispered. He shook his head violently, backing away from the table as if the phone were a venomous snake. That's impossible. I spoke to her. I touched her hand. I pulled up the photo from the steakhouse, the one where he was holding the phone, capturing the reflection in the mirror. I zoomed in on the hand resting on his shoulder, the hand with the heavy gold signet ring, the ring with the deep red garnet stone, the ring Desmond claimed he lost 5 years ago. Look at the hand, Ellington. Look at the ring. That's your graduation gift to him. He didn't lose it. He was wearing it while he was pretending to be your girlfriend. Ellington collapsed into the wingback chair opposite me. He didn't look like a king anymore. He looked like a small, broken child. The love letters, the late-night texts, the whispered promises of a future together. They were all written by his own flesh and blood. The consultancy fee wasn't for a mistress. It was a payment for services rendered. For the performance of a lifetime. He catfished me? Ellington's voice cracked high and pathetic. Desmond? But why? I gave him everything. I stood up then. I walked around the table until I was standing right over him. I could smell the sour scent of his panic. I looked down at the man who had betrayed me, who had drained our accounts. He didn't want your love, Ellington. He wanted your money. And he knew exactly how to get it. He knew you were vain enough to believe a young woman could want you. He knew you were arrogant enough to think you deserved a secret life. Ellington put his head in his hands and began to sob. Deep, racking sobs that shook his whole body. It was a truly ugly sound. I watched him cry for a moment. I felt nothing, no pity, no desire to comfort him, just a quiet, profound sense of justice. The devil didn't come dressed in red, and he didn't come as a blonde Instagram model. He came as family. He came for Sunday dinner. Your son catfished you, Ellington, I said, my voice steady, cutting through his tears like glass. He didn't want an inheritance. He wanted it all, and you handed it to him on a silver platter for a ghost. The silence in the gilded lily was heavy, thick enough to choke on. It wasn't peaceful quiet. It was the suffocating electric stillness of a graveyard at midnight. Ellington sat in the mahogany wingback chair reupholstered in crimson velvet, but he looked like a deflated balloon. He was sobbing these ugly heaving gasps that rattled the leaded glass windows. I just watched him from across the table. I didn't offer a tissue. I didn't offer comfort. I just watched the destruction of a 30-year lie unfold in real time. The air smelled of lemon polish. And then the bell. That little high-pitched brass bell above the front door. It chimed bright and cheerful, cutting through the gloom like a knife. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. The cadence of the footsteps was wrong. It was the heavy, calculated gait of a man who thinks he owns the world. Desmond walked in. He wore that navy blazer, making him look like a junior senator running for a seat he hasn't earned yet. He stopped mid-stride when he saw Ellington. The smile froze on his face. He looked from his broken father to me, standing rigid by the counter. I swear I saw his brain calculating a new exit strategy behind his eyes. "Dad?" Desmond said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "What is going on? I've been calling you for hours." "Marisol, why is he here like this? Is he drunk? Did he hurt you?" He stepped forward, reaching out a hand. But I saw the way his eyes darted to the display case, checking for the inventory. I stood up slowly. My knees popped. A reminder of my age, but I stood tall, smoothing my emerald silk blouse. I looked at my stepson and I felt nothing, just ice, pure, clean ice. "He's not drunk, Desmond," I said, my voice steady. "He's just been educated. He knows about Tallulah. He knows about the $3 million. He knows about DV Holdings." Desmond's eyes narrowed. He straightened his blazer, slipping back into his role. "I don't know what kind of hysterical fantasy you've cooked up now, Marisol. This is a private business matter. The transfer to Diva Holdings was perfectly legal. It was a consultancy fee for strategic planning. Dad signed the papers himself. You just bitter because you've been cut out. It's pathetic, really. How quaint. I walked around the table, the heels of my loafers clicking on the heart pine floor. I wanted him to smell the beeswax on my hands, to remember who I used to be. Tell me something, Desmond. Do you remember sitting at my kitchen island in Chapter 5? Do you remember eating that sharp cheddar? Do you remember drinking that whispering angel rosé? He scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. What are you talking about? That was months ago. I came to check on you. Ellington never told me what Tallulah drank, I continued, stepping closer. He never told me she was a sommelier. He never told me she hated red wine. But you knew? You knew she liked Whispering Angel. You mentioned it right there at my island, swirling that pink liquid in my Wedgwood glasses. How did you know what his imaginary girlfriend drank, Desmond? Did the script say so? Did it say, Phase 4, establish sophistication with rosé? Desmond's face twitched. The color was draining from his cheeks, leaving him looking like a wax statue left in the sun. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried to recover. I guessed. It's a popular brand. You're grasping at straws. You always were jealous of our relationship. Am I? I reached under the counter. I pulled out the document I'd printed out not an hour ago. I slapped it down on the glass display case. It sat right next to a pair of Victorian diamond earrings. Austin Police Department. Formal report of wire fraud and elder abuse. Case number 24, A9987. He stared at the paper. He couldn't move. That's fake. You can't file a police report. You have no standing. I do now, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, because your father, the victim, is sitting right here. And he just told me everything. The police are already looking at the digital footprint from Unit 422. They know about the voice modulator apps. They know about the stock photos. They know you transferred $3 million to a shell company you control. That's not a consultancy fee, Desmond. That's a prison sentence. Ellington lifted his head then. His eyes were red, swollen, rimmed with exhaustion, but for the first time in years they were clear. He looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw the monster he had created. You stole from me, Desmond, Ellington whispered, his voice cracking. You made me believe. You made me believe she loved me. You made me think I had a second chance. Desmond took a step back, his hand trembling as he reached for the door handle. He was trapped. The walls of the shop, lined with mirrors and gilded frames, were closing in on him. He looked at me, pure panic flashing in his eyes, the arrogance stripped away. You can't prove it, he stammered, his voice rising an octave. You have no proof I was the one on the phone. It's just a burner phone. It's just texts. You're crazy. You're a crazy, bitter old woman. I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a restorer who has just stripped away the cheap veneer. I pointed to the far corner of the shop, to the small, unassuming vintage clock on the shelf, the one with the tiny, unblinking lens hidden in the Roman numerals. I don't have to prove it, Desmond. You just did. You want to know what the sound of a soul leaving a body looks like? It looks like Desmond Vreeland standing in the middle of my antique shop, staring at the ticking hands of a Victorian grandfather clock. The air in the Gilded Lily just curdled. It went from the sweet scent of beeswax and old mahogany to the sour, metallic stink of panic in a heartbeat. He didn't run. I think he wanted to. I could see his knees locking up. The fight-or-flight response warring with the sheer arrogance that had kept him afloat for 30 years. He looked at me, and for the first time, he didn't see a stepmother. He didn't see a trophy wife. He saw the jury, the judge, and the executioner all wrapped up in an emerald silk blouse. And then the bells chimed. Not the clock, the front door. The sound of those heavy boots hitting the heart pine floor, that sound will echo in my dreams for the rest of my life. It wasn't a dramatic raid. There was no kicking down of doors, no flashbangs. It was 2 officers from the Austin Police Department walking in with the calm, terrifying efficiency. The flashing blue and red lights swept across the showroom, turning the crystal decanters and the velvet settees into a disco of doom. I saw it reflected in the gilded mirror over the fireplace, this chaotic swirling light painting Desmond's face in horror. Officer Miller, I read his name on his chest, walked right up to him. Desmond Vreeland? He asked. It wasn't really a question. Desmond tried to smile. That sickening, oily salesman smile he used at the country club. Officers, there's been a mistake. This is a family dispute, a domestic matter. He actually looked at Ellington for help. He looked at the man he had stolen $3 million from and expected him to step up and save him. How quaint. But Ellington just sat there. He was slumped in the Chippendale chair like a bag of wet cement. He hadn't moved since I pointed out the camera. He was staring at the floor, his mouth slightly open, watching the wreckage of his life settle around him. When Officer Miller grabbed Desmond's wrist to pull his hands behind his back, I saw it. The garnet ring, that heavy gold signet ring with the deep red stone. The ring I saw in the Instagram photo. The one Tallulah was wearing. The metal cuffs clicked shut. It was such a small, sharp sound. Click. But it was louder than a thunderclap. That was the sound of the trap snapping shut. That was the sound of the con finally ending. Desmond started babbling then. The composure cracked. You can't prove anything. That's my property. Dad, tell them. Tell them it was a consultancy fee. Dad, say something. He was screaming now, his voice cracking, pitching up into a whine. That sounded nothing like the sophisticated mastermind he thought he was. He sounded like a petulant child. But Ellington didn't say a word. He didn't even lift his head. He just let them lead his son past him. I watched Desmond's face as they frog-marched him toward the door. He was looking at me, eyes wild, searching for any shred of mercy. But I just stood there, leaning against the mahogany counter, my hands folded. I felt nothing. No joy, no sadness, no burning rage. Just a vast, empty coldness. Like a house that's been stripped of all the furniture. I saw the irony in it. He spent years constructing a digital ghost, a phantom woman named Tallulah, to haunt his father. And now, he was the one becoming a ghost. He was vanishing into the back of a patrol car, destined to become a case number and a mugshot in a database. They shoved him through the front door, the little brass bell jingling a cheerful farewell. I walked to the window, keeping my distance from the glass, and watched through the sheer curtains. I saw the rain starting to fall on South Congress, the streetlights slicking the pavement. As they bent his head to push him into the back seat, Desmond turned. He looked right at me through the rain and the glass. I didn't see a stepson. I saw a stranger. I saw a monster who would hollow out his own father. Just to buy a silver sedan and a storage unit full of wigs. The door slammed. The cruiser pulled away. Taillights flaring once, then disappearing into the Austin night. The shop was silent again. Just the hum of the refrigerator in the back and the ticking of the clock on the wall. And then, from the darkness of the chair behind me, a voice, broken, ruined. Marisol, please. The silence was heavier than the humidity. You could hear the rain hitting the asphalt outside. That steady drumming sound that usually puts me to sleep, but tonight it just sounded like static on a dead channel. I was standing by the window, watching the red taillights of the patrol car fade into the darkness when the chime went off. That specific, digital ding-dong from my phone. I unlocked the screen. A Ring app popped up. Timestamp 11:42 p.m. There he was, Ellington, standing under the flickering porch light of the Gilded Lily. He wasn't wearing a coat. He was just standing there, soaked to the bone, looking like a ghost that didn't know it was already dead. His shoulders were slumped, that Ralph Lauren polo sticking to his skin, and he was shivering, just vibrating with cold and terror. I didn't want to open it, I really didn't. But it's like slowing down to look at a car crash on Mopac. You know you shouldn't, but you have to see the damage. I walked to the door, my hand steady on the deadbolt. I unlocked it, swung it open, and the smell hit me. It wasn't the smell of his usual cologne, sandalwood, and bergamot. It smelled like stale cigarette smoke, cheap vending machine coffee, and that distinct, chemically lavender scent of Motel 6 laundry detergent. He looked up, and I swear his eyes were red-rimmed and wild. Marisol, he choked out. Water was dripping off his nose onto my welcome mat. Please, it's raining, let me in. I leaned against the door frame, crossing my arms. I wasn't about to make this easy. Why are you here, Ellington? You should be at the police station giving a statement, or maybe looking for a lawyer. Although I doubt you can afford one now. He flinched like I'd slapped him. He stepped closer, dripping onto the threshold. I can't go back there. to the motel. I can't. It's awful. I made a mistake, Marisol. A terrible, terrible mistake. I messed up, he said, his voice cracking. He reached for my hand, but I pulled back like he was radioactive. I was confused. I don't know, stupid. I thought I was in love. I thought she was real, but it was all fake. Desmond, he played me. He played us both. Oh, Desmond played you, I said, my voice flat. But who signed the transfers, Ellington? Who changed the passwords? Who looked me in the eye and called me stifling? He hung his head. I know, I was blind. But I'm seeing clearly now. I want to come home. Let me come home, Marisol. I can fix this. I know I can. It was surreal. Standing there in the doorway, listening to the man who left me broke beg for shelter, I suddenly flashed back to 1994, our wedding day. We were at the Austin Country Club surrounded by hydrangeas. People who cared more about the open bar than the vows. He looked so young then, so hopeful. He squeezed my hands and said, Marisol, you are my anchor. I believed him. God help me, I believed. That man would protect me from the world. Now he was the storm I needed shelter from. You can't fix it, I told him. The money is gone. The house is gone. Desmond is in a holding cell. What exactly do you think you can fix? I can get it back, he insisted, his voice rising. I have connections. I know people. I can liquidate the rest of the portfolio. There are bonds, stocks, things Desmond didn't know about. I can get us back on our feet. Just let me inside. Please, I'm so cold. I looked at him, really looked at him. He wasn't offering me love. He was offering me a business proposition. He wanted access to what little stability I had left. He wanted to crawl inside the Gilded Lily and hide from the world he destroyed. It was pathetic. It was nauseating. I was blind, Marisol. He wept, actually weeping, snot and rain running down his face. Right there on my welcome mat. I love you. I never loved her. Not really. It was a fantasy. He was right about that last part. He never loved her because she never existed. Tallulah was just a collection of pixels and scripts. A phantom created by his own son. But the tragedy wasn't that he fell for a ghost. The tragedy was that he chose that phantom over the flesh and blood woman who spent 30 years keeping his house warm. I looked at the man I once promised to love until death do us part, and I realized with a cold, sharp clarity that Marisol Vreeland had died the moment he checked that bank balance. I was just the ghost now. He stood there on my porch, shivering in that soaked Ralph Lauren polo, smelling like wet cigarettes and vending machine coffee. And he actually had the nerve to offer me a lifeline. Bonds, Marisol, he stammered, his teeth chattering. Municipal bonds, in a safe deposit box at Frost. Desmond didn't know about them. We can split them. We can start over. I looked at him, really looked at him. For 30 years, I looked at this man and saw a king, a provider, a man who put a roof over my head and diamonds around my neck. But standing there in the harsh glow of the porch light, I didn't see a king. I saw a stray dog that had been kicked off the porch one too many times, coming back to the only hand that ever fed him. And the most terrifying part, the part that makes me laugh even now, no love, no hate, just a vast empty quiet. I told myself I should be angry. I should scream at him. But I wasn't. I was just done. I didn't slam the door. That's too dramatic. That's for soap operas. I simply closed it. Slowly. Gently. I watched his face through the narrowing gap, the hope dying in his eyes as the wood met the frame. Click! I slid the deadbolt home. It made a heavy, metallic thud that vibrated in my hand. And then I stood there in the foyer. Just me. And the silence. The silence was loud at first, humming in my ears like the aftermath of a concert. The smell of his cheap motel coffee was already fading, replaced by the scent of beeswax and old wood, the smell of me. I walked past the antique grandfather clock that used to intimidate me with its ticking. I went to the kitchen. I pulled a bottle of Cabernet out of the rack, a cheap one, a label I liked, not one he approved of. I poured it into a heavy crystal glass. I didn't sip it delicately. I drank. I sat at the island on the marble counter, letting the liquid warm me from the inside out, listening to the rain hit the roof of my shop. 3 weeks. That's how long it took for the gavel to fall. The paperwork is right here on the table beside me. Final decree of divorce. It's a beautiful document in its own way. Thick, cream-colored paper with a raised seal. Travis County District Court. I traced the signature line of the judge with my thumb. Marisol Delacroix. Restoration of assets. The house? Mine. The contents? Mine. The business accounts? Restored. Ellington? Nada. And Desmond? Oh, Desmond. The forensic accountant dug deep. They found the rest of the money hidden in offshore crypto wallets traceable to his IP address. Wire fraud. Elder abuse. Theft. They seized everything. His assets are frozen, his accounts locked. He's sitting in a cell in the Travis County Correctional Complex right now, probably realizing that Tallulah isn't going to visit him on visiting day. The house isn't owned by the Vreeland Trust anymore. The shell company collapsed the moment the indictment came down. It's just property again. My property. Yesterday, I had a locksmith come out, a young man named Jeffrey. He stood in the doorway where Ellington had stood, but he treated the house with respect. He drilled out the old cylinders, brass tumblers that Ellington had touched every day for 3 decades and replaced them with high-security smart locks. I remember holding the new keys in my hand. They were sharp, unscratched. They hadn't opened any doors but this one. The sound of the lock engaging? It wasn't a thud anymore. It was a sophisticated electronic snick. Final. Absolute. Final. Absolute. I walked through the house then. I walked past the Persian rugs I used to vacuum on my hands and knees, because he liked the lines to go one way. I walked past the dining room table where I served him cold dinners while he was out with his imaginary mistress. I touched the walls. I felt the heartbeat of the structure. I had restored the furniture in this shop for years, stripping away layers of grime to find the beauty underneath, but I realized I had never restored myself. Until now. I am standing in the doorway of the master bedroom right now. The rain is drumming against the window pane, a steady rhythmic beat that soothes me. The room is dark, lit only by the street lamps outside. I see the bed, the 4-poster mahogany bed I spent 6 months stripping and refinishing by hand. I did the French polish until my fingertips burned. He never noticed the work. He only noticed the price tag he thought came with it. But I noticed. I walked into my bedroom, the one I paid for, the one I restored, and lay down on the bed. The sheets were cold, but I was finally warm. I didn't need a king. I was the queen.